So the interest rate, now that I'm aware, initially I wasn't actually aware of why it was so high, and now I'm aware that there are 4 charges or 4 increases that the Co-op Bank can't justify. To me, that's £470 a month, every month for the last decade. And for someone working in the NHS, that's an awful lot of money. And I'm appalled that the Co-op is trying to prevent the Ombudsman from investigating this. I didn't even know the Co-op owned my mortgage until last year. I didn't know there was any connection between the Co-op and Mass 5, but I think I was an easy target, and a lot of other people were who had these mortgages, and the Co-op has done its best to exploit the situation to its own advantage. I'll come to what happened to me during the pandemic. So I've got an immunodeficiency that I was born with, and I asked the Co-op for help in a phone call in December 2020. I had made them aware before. The response was, and this is the usual response, you need to sell your home using our assisted voluntary sale scheme. Now, we were just going into a lockdown. Vaccinations had only just started in December 2020. Why on earth I would agree to sell my home in a lockdown when I'm actually not meant to be leaving the house? I was just absolutely appalled. But this is the attitude that I've always had from the Co-op. There's never any help offered whatsoever. So I decided at that point it was just not worth continuing contact because there was no assistance going to be available. So in April 2021, on the first day that we partially opened up the lockdowns, a field agent arrived at my door to threaten me with repossession. Now, this is a letter I wrote to Mass 5. So this one was in September 2021, explaining about my immunodeficiency. This was sent by my immunodeficiency here. It was sent by registered post. It was received. My complaints are normally not replied to, and this one wasn't replied to either. But I have the receipt for the fact it was received, and it was also in my file of papers when I made a subject access request. So Mass 5 here were definitely aware that I had an immunodeficiency. This is the document that I signed to allow the field agent to pass on details of my immunodeficiency to Mass 5. Now, I'm glad I took a copy of this because Mass 5 have removed nearly all documents relating to me being a vulnerable customer from the documents I received when I made a subject access request. But I said to him that I would take a copy of this to give him permission to tell Mass 5 about my condition. I also mentioned it on the phone on the 29th of December 2020, yet on the 20th of December 2021, when the Ombudsman had already asked Mass 5 not to repossess because I had a complaint, the solicitor here says that the claimant has no specific information concerning the defendant's personal means at present. Well, this is all about the effect of the coronavirus. I could not have made it any clearer. And it just appalls me that Co-op bank staff are prepared to lie in court to get what they want. Now, I was able to challenge this, and I wrote to the judge and I sent a 42-page document with all the evidence that showed that this wasn't true, and also that there was a support for mortgage interest claim ongoing, and that there was an ombudsman's case. You can see here they've denied the SMI claim here. I think further down there is somewhere here as well about the fact that there's an ombudsman. Oh, here we are. Is there an unresolved complaint by the defendant to the Financial Ombudsman? Well, yes, there was, and someone's ticked no. Now, if I hadn't fought this, I would have just been repossessed by now. Luckily, the judge must have read my evidence because the case was struck out of court, which is what I requested. But this is not this sort of behaviour is just not unusual. I just get the impression that Mass 5 would like to repossess now and ask questions later. So, I was charged £800 in legal costs, even though it was struck out. The Ombudsman asked twice for that action not to go ahead, but Mass 5 just didn't take any notice. Mass 5's response is that they're unable to help me in the pandemic because I'd had arrears previously. But there was no help then either. So at what point is the help? Because it's not the first time you run into trouble, it's not the second time, and anything after the first time, help is refused on the basis that you've had arrears previously. So I just have not really had any help at all. I've had a 1 month payment holiday that I'm aware of over the last, since 2009. So I spent some time in hospital in 2017. I was attacked when I was a paramedic very nastily, ended up in hospital, having surgery. Now, a friend of mine, because my mental health is in such a poor state, a friend of mine communicated with Mass 5 on my behalf. All that's been removed from my file, the information that I've been given. Everything relating to me being vulnerable has pretty much been removed. Now, I had to sell my buy-to-let property at that stage to pay my arrears because I was not allowed to have any help or any payment holiday, and that buy-to-let property was how I was going to pay the mortgage off at the end of the term. I went back to work, but I did find it quite difficult, and I was threatened with repossession again from Mass 5. This is in 2019 when I fell into arrears. Wasn't allowed help, and eventually the letters came through for repossession again. Good. And as you can see, it was quite a nasty head injury, as that's what I did to my windscreen, but it's been a terrible time trying to get back from this, and of course there's been no help from Mass 5 at all. Now, most things have been removed from my file about after that time when I discussed my mortgage with Mass 5. There's one thing here which just astonishes me. This was when I ran away from hospital twice. My head injury was that bad. Didn't know where I was. I thought I was living in someone else's house. This is a note on my file here when I'm being threatened with court action and told that I would be going to court and Mass 5 would be seeking a 28-day order. And it says here, Mr., meaning me, appeared a little incoherent at times throughout the call, probably due to his concussion. So why would you be discussing court action with a patient who isn't even coherent enough to make a phone call? Is there any policy at all for vulnerable customers? Because I don't see, if there is, that it's being adhered to. And then I've got another note on my file talking about how I was going to be able to pay my mortgage after that car accident. I did actually pay it, but my mother was told that if she didn't pay it, I would be made homeless while I was in hospital. Now, clearly that wouldn't have happened, would it? Because you couldn't do that. But on this particular phone call, it does actually say customer was in hospital. So that's just from the last 2 or 3 years, really. But the fact is, if my variable rate had not gone up, I would never have been in arrears. I would still have a buy-to-let property. I would be able to pay this mortgage off at the end of the term, and now I'm absolutely financially crippled. So I do hope that the Ombudsman is able to investigate why we've been charged such appallingly high rates of interest. My experience is it's so stressful communicating with Mass 5. The staff are rude, there's no help available, and I always get the impression that all they want to do is to get me to sell my home or to repossess it. And that's where I stand today. Yes, they were asked to, but they went ahead, and they were asked again not to, but left it right until the 2 weeks before the hearing to adjourn it. So I had 4 months of over Christmas last year wondering if I was going to be repossessed. But by the time Mass 5 agreed to adjourn it, because of the FOSS complaint, I'd already put my evidence into the judge. Now, which I was invited to do on the documents that came through from the court. Now, because the hearing was not actually cancelled, on that date that the hearing should have been on, it obviously wasn't cancelled with the court. The judge read my documents and the case was struck out. And I did ask the judge to strike it out because I said this, clearly that this untrue what's been said on the court documents. I'd been suffering with my mental health problems. I do locum work now, and I was working out of my area to try and make enough money to pay off my arrears. And the court documents had already come through, so the legal action had started to repossess. My mother paid those arrears off, but then I was receiving phone calls and text messages while I was in the hospital from Mass 5 on this particular one, which is worrying anyway, but I wouldn't be so worried about it now, to be honest. But I was worried about it when I was in hospital because my mental health wasn't very good. So on this occasion, I'd phoned them back to make sure that I'd paid, because the legal action hadn't been, it had only been, there is a letter to say it could continue. It hadn't been finished entirely.
First of all, thanks, John, thanks for coming in and explaining that to us. It can't be easy, so trying to put myself in your position. So thank you for doing that. We said we would, we would split the session to enable this to happen, and that we wouldn't, sit here and pretend we can solve everything you're showing to us, explaining to us here and now. But we'll certainly, Chris and I and the team, go away and certainly consider it. Chris, is there anything you?
Well, yeah, I would just say there that I was told by Mass 5 in August last year that I could no longer pay my mortgage unless it was under a suspended court order, and I haven't been told otherwise yet.
But without it's clearly a very difficult set of circumstances, and I appreciate you said during your update that you because of some of the treatment you received, you've stopped speaking to the bank. Clearly that does make it very difficult to kind of reach any conclusion that might satisfy either of us. So I guess our request would be, please, if we could reach out to you directly, and we'll make sure it's one of the senior team, and we can go through that and discuss the circumstances.
Yeah, we can do by letter. Yeah.
Okay. If that's the only way you'll communicate, I think we were wondering whether it might be helpful. As we did with Mrs. Hume, we actually met her in one of our branches to go through some of the circumstances. I think both parties found that helpful. I don't know whether that would be possible or not.
Well, it's a possibility. I'll be absolutely honest with you. I've been forced now into so many arrears, into such a high value of arrears. I can't really see how I'll be paying it off. So and that there hasn't been any help. I appreciate what you're saying, but we've come all this way, but there never is any help. The only help is, would you like to sell your home using our Assisters Voluntary Sale Scheme? And I think we fundamentally disagree on the fact that I've already been overpaying you for my mortgage anyway, because you hiked my rate up to such a ridiculous level.